my background comes more from the mountains rather than coming from a running background. So I actually have sort of years of accumulated experience in the mountains. And then also, this year alone, for example, I spent a lot of time sort of doing skills practice. And so there's like this accumulation of skills that you're going to want to have. And so that'll include cramponing technique and rescue techniques. If someone were to want to fall into a crevasse, like how do you get them out? So you've got sort of that whole skill set that you want to build up. You also probably, wouldn't have seen the part where I was acclimating. So like acclimatizing, spending time up in high elevation to get used to it. I also was on the route at least 6 times this spring. So I could be making sure I knew where the right passage was. I wasn't just following a GPX track on my watch, right? Like I knew it very, very well. And I knew exactly where I was going to be going. And every time when I was out there and I wasn't going for speed, I had so much more stuff with me, right? I had a big backpack and I had bigger boots and I had, everything I would need to go more slowly. And so I wouldn't get cold, so I wouldn't get hungry and all of this. So I think, all of sort of that initial preparation that I had. Another thing is that I think I told you I blocked 2 months out for this project this spring where I pretty much didn't agree to do anything else. Like even I was hesitant to make a doctor's appointment because I was like, but what if it's the day when the conditions are good? And so, right, when you see the person or you see the photos of me doing Mont Blanc in, really quickly, well, it wasn't just any day. I didn't pick that day a year in advance and say on, June 17th, I'm going to go. I was really, really closely watching the weather and the conditions. So I know a bunch of mountain guides, including my husband, and I was talking to them about what the conditions were like. The hut caretaker was telling me about how the snow was refreezing almost every day. I was talking to meteorologists about, where the 0-degree isotherm was going to be. So it's not something that I would encourage anybody to approach oh yeah, I'd love to do that this summer and I'll be there the second week of August. So I'm going to go for it. To get the right day when it's possible to go fast and light, it's not accidental. You really have to kind of, plan for that. And I think, so that's a luxury that I have in some ways with Mont Blanc because I live here. And so I can keep that big window. To go back to the idea of adaptation really quickly is that obviously not everyone's going to live here. And most people are going to have a relatively short amount of time that they're on vacation for, and they can only choose that window. And I think that's okay. But in that case, you should say, okay, I have this skill set. I have this gear and equipment with me. These are the conditions I'm looking at. What is possible? Rather than saying, I must do Mont Blanc Summit, you can say, okay, I've got all of these other things lined up. What else could I be doing? And being willing to adapt your objective according to what the conditions are that you're looking at. And I think that's super important. And then another thing that we talked about, and you mentioned is gear, right? And so I had all of the gear on the required gear list, which, some people kind of joke about and rightly so. But at the same time, it's really important to be reminding people that you don't actually go in shorts and a t-shirt. You have a whole bunch of other stuff with you. And so I had boots that could take a semi-automatic crampons with a steel front point and aluminum back. I had an ice axe, etc. I'm lucky as a professional athlete to have access to really lightweight gear, and anybody can have access to it, but it's expensive to invest in all of these really lightweight things. But so you and I talked about that, we had pretty much, very similar gear when you were in the mountains last summer to when I had, except that mine was all much lighter. And I was shaving off grams. I was adjusting all these little things to try to make it as light as possible, but as safe as possible.